She has a kind of lightness of touch with even dealing with the hardest of subject matters, and she takes you as a reader, and even more so as a speaker, which you're lucky enough to be hearing her today. She really takes you to the moment that she's writing about, to that feeling, to that emotion, and you're really there. They communicate emotionally very powerfully, which is really a key thing. She's shamefully young, and she's terribly brilliant, and she's the 2012 winner of the Roundhouse Poetry Competition, Slam Poetry Competition. So I've asked for today, to start off with, for her to just read one of her poems, Matchstick Lips, to just give you a sense of her and her work before we have a chat about her and how she got to be where she's going next.
Sorry, hi. So yeah, I'm Hibaq, and I'm going to be reading some poems. This is Matchstick Lips. I'm just going to go ahead and do it and then go into conversation with Selma. He told me not to wear my words with a smile. Said this was not something I should want to caress in my palms, not a crown I should wear, or a check I should cash. We do not have the privilege of being asleep. Our bones ripped away from muscle, sharpened and used as spears. This is not a competition, not a talent. Only aching and oaths, only blood and scars. This is no human song. I'm not sure if I've ever been asked harder questions, and on the evening I told my mother I was a poet. Says daughter, are you proud of what you do? She has many questions I do not have answers for, wonders if I am mourning, if I've spilled enough tears to replace the ink of all the pens I've broken out of frustration, says daughter. This is not new to us. This poetry born of so-called illiterate minds, of bloodshed and moving, do you not know you come from nomads? There is no home here or there, there is only journey. There is only pebble ground and bushfire, there is only moonlight and struggle. Him, this can't be a bestseller, an award winner. This can only be true. Sharing yourself comes easy when the stories you tell aren't your own. You might pray for serenity or the calm of closing lines, but I've learned. If you treat every poem like a eulogy, it's okay to feel like something in the room has just died. Okay to profess your words as truths, to speak from quivering lips and keep hands in pockets, to never look the listeners in the eye for fear of losing yourself for the final time, mother. On the few occasions you told me you loved me, you made it sound like an apology. This is what I am running from, and also what I am running to. I do not wear my words with a smile, and sadly, this is the only thing I have in common.
Do you want to just start by telling us a bit about yourself? You just told me that you always lived in Hounslow.
Yeah.
When did you start getting interested in poetry? Did you have anyone who particularly inspired you? Can you tell us?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Hounslow in West London. I was actually born in a house. My mother gave birth to me in the bed, which is something that doesn't usually happen. And I've always lived there, and so a lot of my writing is very localized, and it's about the communities that I grew up in. And I'm Somali, so a lot of my writing is about being Somali and what it means to be Somali in a very Somali-oriented community where, you know, my mum's friends all pretty much raise me just about as much as she does. And yeah, that's really why I started writing, was to document stories that I think I didn't, now I hear more of, but when I was younger I definitely didn't. And when I was, I was a very early reader and a very, very early writer, and so I started writing very, very quickly. And I didn't know that what I was doing was poetry or anything like that. I just thought I was writing. just to write. And then as I kept going, you know, English was always kind of my strongest subject in school, and then in year 10 I specifically remember my teacher, I was doing coursework, GCSE coursework, and my teacher sat me down after I'd submitted a piece for creative writing, which was 4 or 5 poems that would go towards my GCSE grade, and he just thought, have you ever thought about doing this as, you know, a career option? Have you ever seriously thought about poetry? And I said no. And then he was like, well, if you do, you know, I'm here, and I still keep in touch with that teacher, which is great. And I think that's what really spurred me. I was in year 10, so year 11 I went to a lot of like open mics or wherever I could get into, because there was an age limit. And then first year of sixth form was when I really started performing, and second year was the Roundhouse. So
it's fantastic. And tell me, when you were going to these places when you were like, what, 18 or younger, how did it feel? I mean, how did you get through the nerves? You didn't know anybody else was doing this kind of thing, and you were going into these places. How would you even find out about them?
I'm very big on social media.
Okay.
I really enjoy social media, specifically Twitter, and I don't really use it as a place to be a writer. I just use it because I've always used it since I was very too young, and yeah, so I just look up what was happening, and I met this one poet who's now actually stopped doing his music and poetry, but he's called the Ruby Kid, and his name is Daniel. And he sort of befriended me when I was, you know, very young. Was just like, hey, these places are great, but you kind of need to know someone to get in, or to find a performance space for you. And you'll find that, you know, when you're young, maybe a lot of the older people may not want to listen to you, but some of them are very willing to. And so he kind of took me under his wing and was just like, come to this, come to this, come to this. And so I did, mostly just to listen. And it was after Roundhouse that I was like, okay, I'm gonna start doing this for fun, just for kicks, and then people started paying me for it, so that was nice. That was it.
Yeah, and this line in Matchstick Lips, you say, I'm not sure if I've ever been asked harder questions than on the evening I told my mother I was a poet. I mean, not everything one writes is autobiographical, but did you come against some resistance? Did people find it a rather strange thing for you to be doing? Did they find it kind of too denuding, too revelatory, you know, that perhaps you shouldn't be saying so much about?
The thing that I didn't know at the time is that Somali women specifically have always been writing poetry. And poetry is a really sort of revered art form in Somalia. It's considered really beautiful and important. But what I didn't know was that it was being used at times of civil war to document things that the men weren't documenting. And so that was a real conversation that I had with my mom. And she was just kind of like, well, you're doing something that, you know, my mother did and grandparents did and everyone has been doing in our country for such a long time. But there was this sort of kind of backlash about maybe what I was talking about and how I was talking about it, specifically when I was talking about religion. Oh, wow.
Sorry. It's all right. It's dramatic. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, so there was that kind of. My mum wanted to know what I was writing about. She wanted to know, you know, why I had chosen to write that and why specifically I wanted to share it with people. Because a lot of things that Somali women do are quite hidden. You know, it's very sort of background demons and kind of not for the consumption of others. Okay. So standing on a stage was the weirdest thing for her, not poetry.
Wow.
And yeah, when the book came out, that was the first time actually that she came to see me like perform, because I'd been hiding it from her. I was like, no, I don't do that stuff anymore, you know, or I put it online. I don't share it on the stage. And so she was like, well, you've got a book out, so you have been doing it. And that was it. And I think that was the first time I got a real sort of sincerely positive response from my mum, but also from my siblings and aunts and stuff who can let too much light hit your eyes at once. Pretend you can't even hear the beat of your chest, trying to find itself, realign itself. You think you should be stronger than this. When you name the feeling that disrupted your organs, don't be afraid of words such as love. Try not to place a whole world between you and it, accept and mourn. When the world is laughing at you with everything must go sales, do not take it as a sign that you should have seen either. Remember that you love them. With a heart so pure you fail to recognize it as your own. Think of waking up knowing you can take the earth on. A one-on-one battle between you and the oceans, every continent, the damn heavens themselves. Their voice was your favorite albums meshed into one. Played on a cassette that had been wound up one too many times, your fingers not dainty nor quick enough to fix them. Think of everything you have conquered, all the softness you found on your skin, and how these two notions do not take away from each other. Thank them for this, and realize it was you who needed to be fixed. Thank you.
I had another question, I just forgot what it was. Sorry. Yeah, no, but now I know what I wanted to ask. When you were writing, you said about the sort of cathartic process and like it coming out of you. Do you then, how do you deal with the editing process when you go back to it? When you try to sort of tidy it up? How do you leave it for a while, or do you like the rawness of it? Is that, or are you quite strict about getting down the word count and the beat? I mean, I saw you like, you're tapping with your foot when you read. You've got a definite rhythm there. I mean, or is this basically
the collection is definitely edited. Yeah, no. It depends on the poem. If I want to share a piece, then yeah, it has to be edited, and I'm quite strict with myself. But I'm also very lucky to know a lot of other writers and have them as very close friends, not just sort of people that I can hit up once in a while, but actual real life personal friends. And if I have any issues, I'm always like, can someone do this for me, and how does this sound, or should I change this? And they're always willing to help, and I do the same back, because I need someone else's sort of perspective. Otherwise I get sort of holding on this kind of, but this is what I want to say, and sometimes what you want to say isn't actually understood by somebody else.
Yeah. So
you need to change it, and that's, yeah, I do that. But when I started and I was doing more kind of, we spoke earlier about spoken word versus page poetry. Right. When I started, what I was doing, even up until Roundhouse and afterwards, was spoken word, which is great, and I love it. I still do, but I really wanted to focus on page poetry, because I think whether we talk about it or not, spoken word poets aren't taken as seriously for like the art of writing, and they're just sort of seen as performers all the time, and some of them really aren't. Like they're brilliant writers, and I don't think they should have to force themselves to do page poetry for their writing to be like encouraged and seen. But for me, it was definitely kind of, I'd never been taught poetry that was poetry from people like me. So I wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to see if I could do something on the page that someone who's never met me can read and say, I like this as a poem, as technical and like a crafted piece of art. And so that's kind of where the shift came. But when it comes to performance, I used to read. I used to never read actually. I used to just memorize everything. And now I pretty much just read, mostly because there's a collection now, but also because I feel more myself if I'm just reading from a page, knowing that this is what I've written and I trust myself in this process. Whereas if I have to memorize it, I think I'm kind of, it helps with the nerves, but I think I'm kind of putting on a facade for the sake of entertainment. Whereas other people kind of do that very naturally, and it's not fake for them. It's just that's how they like to read. So that's kind of what happened.
Okay. And when you do events, what kind of events have you been asked to read at? What kind of audiences come to your events? How is it? Is it mainly Somali? Is that the sort of minority? Is it sort of more? I mean, what kind of panels would you? Where are you reading your poetry?
It varies. I mean, I pretty exclusively read in London because I live in London. But when I've been performing employment opportunities, reading opportunities to read elsewhere in the country. I find that the audiences aren't as diverse, but I'm not sure entirely why that is. Maybe it's just the poetry community maybe just isn't as big in those cities as it is here. But when I'm here, I mean, it's for a range of different things. Sometimes actual, event organizers or companies will email you and say, we want you to come and do this, and sometimes organizers will say, well, it's an event about this, and so we want you to focus on, I did a feminist event recently, and so all my poems, obviously, most of my poems are about women, but they were like specifically, it'd be cool if you did that, and I did. But as for audiences, I always see a couple Somali people in the audiences, especially Somali girls. I've never met a Somali girl in my life that hasn't either been a singer or like a writer or like without even sort of saying this is what I want to do. For some reason they can all sing. Like they're just laughing at me because it's true. Like we all either sing or write poetry or do something creative. Like it's very, very natural to us whether we talk about it or not. And there's always one or two in the crowd, but it's not like Somali only events.
Okay. And how do you feel about, I mean, I don't know, you're quite early on in your career, I don't know whether this has happened to you yet, but have you had people sort of asking for your opinion as a sort of voice of Somalia? Have you found that you've ever been sort of expected to give political commentary? Is that something that how comfortable do you feel about that? I mean, you mentioned before that you were in Somalia at some point. How much connection do you have, and how closely do you follow events there? I mean,
I think I follow events about as much as I can without it being constantly traumatizing. Just because every time I hear about this happening here, I'm thinking a similar thing happened to my mum, back when she was there, or I think about my dad's family who are still all out there, or my mum's other sisters who are still out there. And so you follow these things for as much as you can, but also I think for me it's been really important to understand the disconnect, because I'm British born, and sometimes I just feel like it's not really my place to tell Somali people in Somalia about like what's happening, or say that I'm speaking for them, because they have their own mouths and they can speak, and they do. And so I think it's more important for me to just kind of, where I can, highlight it, or say, find out more about this writer or sort of this news broadcasting company or whatever, because they're out there on a daily basis. But otherwise, I kind of just like stay in my lane, as it were, as a British born, Somali girl. But it's something people ask me. One time this guy, he was really annoying, but one time he asked me, he was like, is it true that in 2008, 8 million Somalis died from famine, like out of nowhere? And this was the first thing he said to me. And it was after a gig, so I was already like kind of shaken up because it was quite a hardcore one, and I think that's why he asked me. But I was just like, what are you doing? Why are you asking me that? That's so traumatizing, and like I'm not thinking about that right now. So why would you bring that to me? And that happens sometimes. Yeah. But for the most part, I think people just kind of, if they do come and speak to me, it's because they like my work, or if they're Somali themselves and they think there's like a connection there, that's cool. Otherwise, yeah.
Are you working on another collection now? Is that the next step for you?
Next step is actually, right now I'm working on some other sort of creative projects that I'm hoping to try and make as inclusive as possible. As for a collection now, I think I'm going to sit on that for a little bit. But I'm still writing, still reading, still doing all of that.
Would you like to read Kisses, and then I think we'll open up for questions?
Okay. Yes, this is titled How to Wash Away False Kisses. And some affection, everything that I've read is from the collection today, so if you want to read it, Anthony's over there at the Free Word Centre, and he has some if you want to buy them verified. If not, you can get it online at the Outspoken Press website. I'm not very good at plugging, I'm sorry. Yeah. China. Say Say it until it becomes a word your tongue recognizes. Say it spitefully, full of loss, with exhausted eyes. Use it as your reply to everything. How are you feeling today? No. Maybe you should go outside. No. What about washing your hair? No. Just pick up your phone. No. I have a few questions I'd like to ask. No. Do you remember anything specific? No. Maybe I should leave you alone. God, no. Say it until you falsely believe he would have stopped. Soon enough, you'll find everybody forgets to ask about it. Start with soap. Then a toothpaste, mouthwash combo. Use a pick until your gums bleed. Move on to tea, ice cold water, salt in juice. Grind herbs with cinnamon. Take it in one dry gulp. Try rice or baking soda. Make cakes with painkillers. Next is bleach. Consider swallowing. You'll decide against it, but you're not entirely sure why, and certain lies. This body is not mine. Grab all you can while you can. Repeat, this body is not mine. Grab all you can while you can. Repeat, this body is not mine. Grab all you can while you can. Name your hurt. Call it destiny. Doesn't abuse leak down our family tree, sap searching for thirsty mouths? We are to share this trauma with our children, another generation of ghost mothers. Do not look for yourself in the news. The numbers do not include us. Swallow wind. The next time you bravely step outside, you will see him in every puddle and decide to walk faster. You will see him in every drunken man and decide to walk faster. You will not take the tube after 9. Rather let the cold stab at your lungs. When you finally tell somebody of the thing that broke you, they will say, this is London. What else did you expect on a Saturday night? And you will walk faster.
Anyone have any questions?
You mentioned speaking at a feminist event, and I was part of the organising committee that organised the TEDx Houston talk where Amanda Adichie did her We Should All Be Feminist speech. And before she gave her speech, no one knew what she was going to speak about. She'd done another talk, TED talk on the single story. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Okay, so no one knew what she was going to speak about, but when she did her speech, the kind of discomfort, to give some context, the TEDx Houston event is, it focuses on Africa and entrepreneurship and that kind of thing. So most of the audience are often from the African diaspora, but a wide range of people come. But there was quite a palpable discomfort amongst the men in the audience when she started giving her speech, which is about, if people haven't read it, essentially about feminism and being an African feminist, and it's been turned into a book. So I was just wondering, you yourself, are you a feminist? And before that point, she hadn't really declared herself overtly a feminist. There were themes in some of her earlier novels, but she hadn't really said it. And afterwards, I think, there was quite a lot of anger from some people because they thought feminism was possibly un-African. So I was just wondering what your opinion is, whether you have an opinion, whether it's the main theme of your work.
Yeah, I'm definitely a feminist. Intersectional feminist would be the best way that I could sort of describe it. Yeah, and it does play a theme in my work. Mostly just because I write about women, and I think it's important for me to write about women, not just myself and my family, but friends and women that I don't know, and women that have such different stories to me. Especially if I read something and I'm saddened or hurt or inspired or whatever it is, and I try to write in response to that. But yeah, there is definitely this idea that feminism is not African, which is really weird for me as a Somali girl, because our country is my country is raised, everyone is raised on it's a very matriarchal society, whether we think about it like that or not. Like our family, women are the heads of our households, and it's not that men are silenced or anything, but they get their space, and their space isn't our space. And I think reclaiming that and understanding that the dynamics of the country, that my parents' bed would be different had women been given the positions that men are afforded in the country. Even thinking that civil war could have been avoided, or there'd be less death or less trauma is something that I regularly sort of revisit. As far as sort of like before this talk with Selma, I was saying I'm not very good with like academically sort of toned questions. I don't respond very well to it, because I think that when people ask me or anyone else something and it's in a very academic tone, I always think, would my mother understand this? And if she doesn't, then that's a problem, because everything needs to be as available to everyone. Academia has its place, of course, but when we're talking about inclusion, or when we're talking about race, when we're talking about identity, this is something that sort of is far bigger than the academics, and we need to speak about it in a way that is not basic, but is as understandable as possible. And I think feminism is one of those things where I don't think my mom would call herself a feminist, but she is. And so, yeah. I don't know if that answered your question. I'm sorry.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I love the poetry, and I was curious to find some very, I'm forgetting the name of the writer, but someone who was drawing on quite formal, traditional structures for Somali poetry, which I hadn't really come across.
Right.
Have they influenced you in the way you work?
Definitely. There's this thing in Somali called Hibaq, which is like, it's poetry, but if I'm saying this right, every syllable starts the same.
Yeah.
For like every line. And there's also, this inspired me more, which is it's done at weddings and stuff like that, sort of celebrations, and there's like sometimes dances that come along with it. And I'd grown up going to so many Somali weddings that always be qabe or like burambur, and like these things that are just women sort of declaring something out loud. And it's always this sort of transition in the crowd where the men sort of step backwards, and it's a very womanly space. And I just think that's so beautiful, and growing up around that has definitely inspired my work. I've never done like qabe myself. I don't know if I could pull it off the same way, because it's something that definitely works best with the language. And I don't write in Somali, so, but yeah, it has inspired me. Thank you for the question.
I've got one more, I think, before we close, which was just on this issue of like being from a migrant background, you have lines in your poetry about moving and neither here or there, this sense of not actually fully fitting anywhere that I think probably a lot of us can relate to. I just was interested in what your views are on what the positive aspects of that are for a writer, for a poet. I mean, that sort of sense of not quite fitting.
Right. I think I've learned since going to Somalia as an adult and over the summer and sort of coming back, what I've learned is I belong there as well. And I think that's the most important thing that I can take out of experiences like that, is like, yes, I do belong here, but I also belong there. And people, when I went, like not just family members, but people on the street will know that you're not from like the city, or you're not even from the country, that you were raised somewhere else. And especially in markets and things like that, people will try to think you have money or whatever. And that was really funny and interesting, but on the other side of that, there's also like acceptance regardless. And so when I'm there, I know that I'm Somali, and when I'm here, I know that I'm Somali, but I also know that I'm British. And I think that's what I felt growing up, was this kind of, as people say, like 1 foot here, 1 foot there, sort of floating in between. But I think I've come to accept now that I'm actually in both places at once, and that is totally possible. Excuse me.
Okay, well, thank you very much,
Thank
Hibaq.
you.
Thank you, well done.